Hey guys, it's Cameron with Audi C7 owners, back again with another DIY install video. Today we're going to be installing the P3 Digital Multi-Gauge that plugs into your OBD2 board. Really excited to bring you this video. The guys at P3 have been a big help trying to get this set up and ready to bring to YouTube so that it can help you guys get it installed. First thing you're going to see when you open the box is that piece of paper there. It says stop, read this first, and there's a reason for that. It gives you a good detailed getting started guide that's really easy to read on the back. Basically, it's going to walk you through the process of wiring up the wiring harness to the display so that you can test it in your car. You want to do that before you install everything. It shows you a wiring diagram, and then it shows you how to use the buttons on the display as well as what they do. And then it'll give you a link at the bottom that'll take you to their website and show you some install videos and some PDF guides on what to do. But we're going to go through everything today in the video as far as how to install it, wire it up, and get it ready to go in your car. I've got the trim tool kit I got from P3 Gauges because mine is old and kind of rough, so I got a new kit. You can add that on as an option in the cart. This is the display here. It's going to come nice and wrapped up and protected. I already opened mine to give it a check before I started filming. You can see it's got the ribbon wire attached to it and the two buttons. It's got the plastic film over the top, and I'm going to leave that on throughout the duration of the install to protect it as we're moving it around and getting it installed into the vent. There's the wiring harness that you're going to be connecting the display to, and then that'll connect to your OBD2 port. And then I've also got the track package, which adds a couple extra options such as 0 to 60 times and 0 to 100 times and a few other things. That is an option you can also add in your cart. And then they threw in a couple nifty P3 gauge stickers. Okay, so we're going to go over the wiring harness so you're fully aware of what each wire does. The guide that came with the car will tell you each one, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. You've got this little mini harness with a purple, black, and yellow wire. That's for an analog boost gauge. If you want to run a boost tap from the engine and run the tubing back to the display and to the wiring harness, you can do that and it will read those. But we're just going to be using the OBD2 readings, so that's going to be this long black wire here, the long black ribbon wire. That'll give us real-time readings for a bunch of different things, including boost. That's your plug that you're going to put in underneath the dash. Moving on from that, we've got a blue and a brown wire. These are for extra analog sensors. We're not going to use those on the C7. I don't know what you might use them for, but with our car, we're not going to worry about it. But they do have these hard plastic covers on the end, and I feel like they could rattle and behind the dash, so we're going to make sure we tape those up really good and tight, and then we'll zip tie everything together. The last wire is this green one. This is for a auto dimming switch. If you want to hook this up to your headlight switch, then when you turn on your headlights, it'll auto dim the display. Otherwise, if you don't use this, you're going to have to manually dim or adjust your dimmer settings. I do plan on doing this one day. I just don't really know where I should tap in yet, so I'm going to do some more research before I come back to this. Okay, before we test our gauge, we need to wire everything up. That way we can test it all at once. We're going to start with the display. You've got the ribbon wire here. You can see the front of the gauge there. You've got the track package add-on. And then lastly, we have our wiring harness. This is pretty simple to do. We're just going to take the display ribbon wire and we're going to connect it to the track package add-on. Once that's nice and seated, you'll take the end of the wiring harness, connect it to the track package, and tighten the screws down. Okay, so now we can take our fully assembled wiring harness and go outside to test the display. We're going to be able to plug it into the OBD2 port, turn the car on, and check and make sure everything's functioning correctly, and then we'll be able to start the assembly. In case you aren't familiar, the easiest way to find your OBD2 port is to just look at the floorboard of your driver's side of your car, follow your dead pedal all the way up, and you'll see the bright purple receiver underneath your dash. That's where you're going to plug in your wiring harness for your multi-gauge. Don't forget to test your gauge before you install it. You want to make sure it's working properly before you go through the whole process of tearing your dash apart, tearing your vent apart, putting this in there, and then putting it back together. If you have any issues, contact P3 Gauges and they'll take care of you. Begin disassembling your dash by using a trim tool to pop off the fuse box cover. You just work your way around, pull it off, and it'll expose the fuse box. You can see all the extra wires in there is from me hardwiring my radar detector. You don't need to worry about that. You're going to run the wire along the very bottom side of your fuse box in that open space between the dash and the white part of the fuse box. Next, take your trim tool and remove the top piece of the dash trim. It just pops right off. Next, you're going to remove the trim that goes over your steering column and the trim that goes around your vent. You're not actually removing the silver trim that goes around your vent, you're just loosening the attachment piece which is underneath the trim that goes over your steering column. I highly suggest that you remove the entire steering column trim piece. I did not in the video, as you can see, and I ended up putting a tiny little crease in it because I pulled it out too far. The P3 Gauges video shows that you can do it this way, and you can if you take your time and you're really careful with it. I was rushing because we had a storm that was coming towards us and I needed to get inside quickly. Unfortunately, that led to me damaging my trim. Once you get the trim popped off and loosened, you can get an 8mm socket and remove the single 8mm bolt that's located above the vent. This will be the last thing you need to do before you start to maneuver the vent out of the dash. Also, be careful with the silver trim around the actual vent assembly. It starts to pull away a little bit and it's not really designed to do that. You can just press it right back on and it'll connect again, but you don't want to rip it off of the vent assembly. As you start to maneuver it out of the dash, don't try and just pull it straight out because there's actually a wire attached to the bottom of the vent that you need to unclip before it can actually be completely removed. The best way to remove the wire from the bottom of the vent is to use both hands. Use one finger on your right hand to get the back and use your thumb on your other hand to get the front of the clip and just remove it and pull the vent out of the dash. Once you've removed the vent from the dash, you can bring it to a workspace, a table of some kind that's easier to work because you're going to start removing some of the blades from your vent, and this can be a little bit tricky. P3 Gauges has a good picture-by-picture guide on their website that you can use, and hopefully this video will show in detail exactly what you need to do, but you're going to work on some clips that are on the top and bottom. You can see I'm working from left to right on the top clips first. You want to work left to right. Just push those in and the top will remove, and you can see you've got a little bit of space. Once you do that, flip it over, and you're going to work on the bottom. Now these are different. You don't come from the back with these. You're going to work from left to right, the right being the green mark there, but you're going to work from the front of the vent. Use caution here with your flat, small screwdriver here, because as you bend these back and push the clip out, your screwdriver will hit the silver trim. If you want, you can put a piece of fabric between your screwdriver and the trim to protect it. But anyways, you're going to get your flat, small screwdriver in there and just pop it up really gently and work your way slowly down the vent until you get to the last one. Like I said, the last one being the one with the green mark there. And then once you do that, the entire fascia of the vent should be easy to pull off and remove. Removing the vent blades can be tricky. You need to remove the top two ones, but you start with the top left corner of the first vent blade and remove it, and then you remove the second one underneath it, and then you can remove the top one from this little clip in the back that you'll see shortly. I couldn't really get my fingers in there, so I tried to use these needle nose pliers, and as you can see, disaster struck. Luckily I didn't break anything, and the metal clip in the back was just fine. You can see it on the right here moving up and down. I was able to put all the vents back in there. That little metal clip that I'm tapping there is what I'm talking about. That's what holds the right side of their vents in there, and it doesn't really interfere with anything. Mine's a little bent, so I'm straightening it up there. It does get in the way though when you try and move the vent up and down to angle the air. That metal piece will go into the back of the gauge and not allow you to angle your vents all the way down. So I think I'm going to go back in there eventually and just bend that out of the way. I won't be able to put the vent blades back in there if I do that, but I don't really plan on removing this gauge ever. Now we're going to be feeding the wire from your display through the vent assembly. You've got the little prong there on the end. You want to make sure that's facing towards the wall of the vent, the left side, because if you have to pull it back out, you don't want that prong to get caught on one of the vents as you pull it through. It can be kind of tricky. It is a little tight there. You want to go on the far left side, make sure your vents are straight so you have as much space to work with. If it gets a little stuck, just take your screwdriver and easily just kind of push it through with a little bit of force. Don't jam it. You don't want to damage the wire. But once it's through, you want to angle it to the bottom of the vent and pull it all the way through, get all the slack out, and then we're going to be installing the display. To install the display, you're going to align your display with your vent. On this vent for the C7, the two buttons on the display should be facing up. You're going to start with the left side of the display. There's two prongs there on the left, and you're going to fit those into the prongs where the vent blades originally sat. And then you'll seat the right side and just give a firm press, not too tough because this display does bend a little bit, but firmly press on each edge until it clips in and is fully seated. Once you have your display firmly seated into your vent assembly, you're going to be putting the face of the vent back on. Start with the bottom clips, working your way from right to left. They'll click in. And once you have the bottom clips fully seated, flip the vent over and work on the top clips. These can be a little bit tricky. There's three clips still. There's the far right and far left side have a little prong that comes out, and you can see it right there. You need to get both of those into the clip before it'll go on, and it's kind of tricky to do with one hand holding the vent, but just work your way around and play with it and you'll figure it out. And then the middle one doesn't have one of those tricky prongs, and once you get them all aligned, it'll just click in. Once those click in, check to make sure everything's fully seated. You can see here it pushes in just a little bit further. Now it's all ready to go and be installed into the car. After you have it all fully assembled, go ahead and test the functions of your vent. Make sure the vent can seal off and close using the dial on the far right, and then using the handle in the middle, rotate the vent blades from left to right and rotate them up and down. Like I said though, that metal clip in the back is going to prevent you from pushing the vent blades down. I'm going to probably go in there and bend that piece out of the way so that I can angle it correctly. Okay, now that you have your vent fully assembled, it's ready to be put back into the dash. Feed the wire in through the hole in the dash and route it underneath the fuse box there, as you can see I'm doing. We're going to route it all the way through the bottom underneath another wiring harness that's in the car. It's a little tight there, but you can push the ribbon wire underneath it. Once you get it underneath that, you can push it to the back and plug it into the OBD2 board. I'll give you guys a close-up view on how I routed the wire here momentarily. Here's the close-up on how I wired it. I put the harness in through the hole in the dash, came down behind the fuse box, you can see it where I'm pointing, all the way to the bottom and underneath that taped up wiring harness that's behind the dash. You see the wire is a little bit exposed there as it goes underneath and back into the OBD2 port where it's plugged in. Eventually I'll go in there and tuck that wire up a little bit neater, but I want to make sure I like everything before I commit to that. Now that you have your wiring harness plugged into your OBD2 port and routed, you just need to plug the display into it. And then we're going to feed all the wiring harness wires back into the back of the dashboard and out of the way so that we can install the vent. You'll see here I'm kind of pushing them down and behind, and I'm going to use my hand to pull them through the side of the fuse box. You can just pull them out the side just to pull out the slack and get them out of the way. You'll be able to tuck them away later. I do apologize here in a bit. My camera's going to cut because it malfunctioned while I was out there. It's an old phone, sorry. But you're not missing much. I'm just pulling slack out through here, and then you'll see me start to feed the vent back into the dash. Don't forget to plug in the wire that you removed before removing the vent. You've got to use two hands again to get that clipped in there. It can be a little tricky, but you'll figure it out. Once you do that and you've got it clipped, you can push the vent all the way back in and seat it completely. Okay, remember to be really careful putting your vent back in. You need to get the vent trim behind the steering column trim. I still say it's a better idea to just completely remove that steering column trim. It's a small piece. That way you can just push the vent back in and get it seated and then put the steering column trim in over it. But if you want to do it like I did, just be really careful. Once you get it behind there though, you can push the vent in from the bottom and the top will slide into place. After it's nice and seated and flush against the dash, get your 8mm bolt and reinstall it to secure the vent into the dash, and then you can put the last piece of dash trim on the top back into place. The last thing you need to do before you button everything up is to just tuck all the excess wires from the wiring harness into your fuse box. There's tons of room underneath the white part of the fuse box, and you can see here I just kind of pushed it together and folded it over itself and tucked it back there. There's also plenty of space to double side tape the track back box to the dash if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary. I haven't heard any rattling at all since I've had it installed in there. Once you're done, get your fuse box cover and put it back on. Once you've got your gauge installed and everything reassembled, this is what your finished product should look like once you get the vehicle turned on. Here I am going through the different settings available to me on my gauge. I do have the track package installed, so I might have some extra options that you don't see on yours if you didn't get the track package. I won't be going into detail in each of these settings in this video. I'll save that for another one in the future. But I will post some links below in the description that'll take you to P3's website, and you can find out anything you want to know on how to use this and find out what each setting really does and what's available to you. The vent looks OEM, which is really nice. It doesn't stand out. It's nice and clean, easy to read. The guys at P3 did a wonderful job with this product. Make sure you go check them out. You won't be disappointed. As always, if you found the video helpful, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Leave comments below with any questions or comments you might have. And as always, I'll see you with the next video.